traveling about that time because everybody studying AIDS wanted to use PCR. That was my invention. So I got invited to all these meetings, and I'd tell them how to do PCR. Well, I didn't care that much about AIDS to begin with, but I started caring after I realized none of these people, when asked directly, privately, sweetly, could come up with anything to help me out, and all I wanted to have was one scientific paper to quote that I could say, this is where I got the concept from that HIV is the probable cause of AIDS. And I thought at that point that that's pretty damn significant because there was a tremendous amount of interest. There were meetings, 10,000 people gather in Amsterdam, 10,000 people gather in various cities around the world every year or two to talk about this work they've been doing at our expense to cure this disease, which they've created at our expense, really. And not a single one of them can find a quote that I could use in a simple little paper to the NIH, that's the National Institutes of Health, that said, the reason you guys sent us $50,000 for this project is because HIV is the probable cause of AIDS, and it would be a good idea to see if it's in the blood supply. Right? There's no way to support that statement. No reason to do that work. It was all a waste of time, except that I enjoyed it. I love to drive from San Diego to LA twice a month. I made a living. And if you think about that, that's where all those guys are making a living. But I changed the question after a while because I was getting no luck with what should I quote. I finally said, when was it that you came to the conclusion? Because you must be, because you just gave a talk about AIDS and HIV. When did you come to the conclusion that HIV was the probable cause of AIDS? Personally, when did you come to the conclusion? And they would generally allude to some paper or something that they had read or whatever, but no one has ever been able to explain to me anything else than I heard it in the New York Times or on TV. Was that fiction or was that fact on TV? It didn't bother anybody to even think about it. I don't know how it is that we all overlook real obvious things like that. But we've done it before on this planet. We do it regularly. It's expected of us to be idiots. I've got a new disease to attend to. I need a drink. And okay, let's remember this. AIDS is, in fact, and if you look at all this stuff together, if you've ever taken a philosophy course, like an introductory one, I took a bunch of them because they had girls in them, and that my chemistry courses at Berkeley didn't. So I strayed over to the philosophy department a lot. And I thought, this is the most useless information I've ever, but there are some nice reasons to be here. So lately I started realizing that this is really, this whole thing, it brings out, and from like Christine's story, to Paul's, I'd say, he's kind of young still. The Georgia Tech boys, we're not, I'm one too. But I've aged, and matured. And so I don't jump on him. I'm a libertarian, by nature, but I've become more and more so as I've realized how little I really know about things. And it is not a good idea, I think, to try to find another cause for AIDS before we have found out whether or not the one that the world believes is true and which has caused them so much disaster. See, the cause of AIDS, supposed, HIV, has caused a lot more trouble in the world than AIDS itself. So the thing to do is to don't worry about AIDS right now. It'll go away, by God. It is going away, and it will continue to go away unless the government raises the ante. They're paying $2,500 a year to every county for every AIDS patient. So there's a reason to have AIDS in my county if I'm the health guy, because it's my budget. Like if you think about how many AIDS cases they can claim to have in LA, multiply that by $2,500, and think about how many cars and stuff you can buy with that, you can see why there's an impetus for saying, if there's anybody that looks anything like an AIDS case, call it AIDS. And don't you listen to Kary Mullis. He's against the state and humanity and your daughter. But AIDS is going away nonetheless, and if we stop funding it, it would vanish overnight. HIV, however, is something we can detect, and people can make money for detecting it. And as long as when they detect it in someone, that person is pretty much cast into an incredibly bad place. in which they will be injected with or coerced to take hideous drugs. Their children will be taken away from them if they won't do it to them. I mean, that's the side of it that we need to worry about. It doesn't make a damn what causes AIDS, really. But the question that we should be asking is, why have we decided that having HIV makes you our favorite Jew, nigger, smoker, whatever we want to jump on, right? You're the perfect one because you brought it on yourself while your lascivious behavior. Something like that. See, we need something like that because, by God, they took away all of our other things like that, didn't they? Those goddamn Democrats. You know, you can't call people names anymore, except you can say they're HIV positive, and you can tell your kids, if you don't eat your cereal, you'll grow up to be HIV positive, and all that stuff. I mean, that's the thing I think we ought to think about here, not whether or not AIDS is caused by it or not. But even if it were caused by it, how do we deal with something like that when maybe it's causal for the very few people that actually get it? See, the people that get AIDS are a very small group compared to the people that have HIV. It may be causal for those people that get it, but it may be that the rest of them just don't have the right chemistry to get AIDS when they get HIV. That's a possibility, which means that AIDS is kind of a genetic heritage that makes you susceptible to some virus that most people can tolerate quite well. That's an alternate hypothesis. Given that that's true, is it fair to stigmatize all of the 99% of people that have HIV but don't have AIDS with the concept that they are going to die and that you better give them some lethal drugs to hasten the process and get them out of the place? I mean, is that all right? I don't know. Maybe if you're homosexual, you should just be killed right away, too, because, you know, you might have it, right? You might have it. We got to check you for it right away. Yeah? Yeah? They didn't do that to you, did they? Or you just lascivious? So am I. I hadn't had one because I don't go to them. You know, you shouldn't go to those people. You know, you go to witch doctors, they're going to put a hex on you. And if you can prove in your mind that our doctors aren't witch doctors, then look at the definition of witch doctors and see if it doesn't fit. I mean, if you want to go to those people, go ahead, but don't expect them to treat you well. You know, why would you think that they're going to treat you well? That's a neurotic claim. We all know that lawyers don't treat you well, don't we? Do you come on? My lawyer is so bad, he sends me a bill. You know? He sends me more. I mean, he tries to take me for a ride. We know that about them. We know that about ourselves. Don't lay yourself at the feet of somebody just because he puts on a white robe and makes statements in Latin. It's not that medicine doesn't have some good things going for it. They've got drugs, that's for one thing. Sometimes those are useful, but they're not made by those guys. Those guys don't even know how to write the structure of those drugs. Those are made by chemists. You know, we don't go to chemists to find out whether we should pee at the right places or have sex in this way or that, you know. Chemists don't know either. The doctors certainly don't know. I mean, we are living in a pretty weird planet here, but it shouldn't be that weird. It really shouldn't. You go to one profession to get the products from another profession. And the one profession tells you all that stuff about them. They don't know anything about them. The other one doesn't sell them to you. They sell them to those. You know? I mean, it's a funny kind of a thing going on there. A chemist who makes AZT himself can't go out and buy some to take. Same thing with any other drug. The chemists are making them. The chemists don't get to prescribe them. Why don't the doctors make them? Because they don't have the sense. They don't know how to do it. The doctors don't know how to make drugs. They buy them. And if they've got anything else, I'd like to see it. You know, what has changed? What is the difference between our medical people and witch doctors? It's drugs. Now, they don't make them. They have an economic way of like being the only people that can give them to you, and they make money out of doing that, and they act so cool, you know? But they really are a worthless bunch of bastards if you're sick. Okay, you want me to stop talking like that? Oh, okay. What do you want to know? I'm sorry.
I just want to say, at this point, since it's getting long in the day, you guys have gotten an idea. If you have any questions, if you want to open any dialogue, please do so. Please know that this is an open forum. That if you have any proof that HIV does cause AIDS, please show it to me as soon as possible, or anyone else here. But other than that, this is a safety net. This is something I'm putting out because I believe that if you tell enough people will care. Enough people are good, true, and beautiful human beings. To be honest with you, I am disappointed that not more of my own colleagues, actor friends that I had invited that said, I'll be there, are not here. But one is actually David Gray, thank you very much, and Krista Rowe. I mean, there's a bunch of you people, Apollonia, but there should be more. There should be a lot more. We should care about this because we dish this out unthinkingly to the world. And I think it is our responsibility, first and foremost, to finally go through this educational process, as uncomfortable as it is, because it's worth it. Because if what we are saying or suggesting is true, the implications are humongous. They're terrible. Then we are living in the belly of the beast, and what do we do about that? I don't want to take it sitting down. So if any of these meetings brings back one or two people, it would have been worthwhile for me to put them together, because one or two people is exactly what we literally got the last time we held one of these, and one of those people is Laura Shapiro. And I thank God we put on the event, because without Laura's help, so much necessary work would not be done, because Christine is pregnant, and Christine and Robin and the people at HEAL only have so much. We did not choose to ask you for money, nor is this a press event, because we think that the integrity of this information stands on its own. And at some point, you will be compelled to join forces in whatever way you can. At some point, you will be compelled to talk to your rich friends about this, to talk to your celebrity friends, to tell people, you know, just hear some of this stuff out. Just read this information. Just see for yourself. Ladies and gentlemen, any questions, any thoughts? Anybody want to share their experiences, or anybody have a problem with what was discussed here today? Yes, sir.
Do you believe that there is a rise since the 80s in immunodeficiency syndrome, whether or not all be labeled under the blanket of AIDS, and whether or not HIV necessarily be the cause of it, but that certainly there is something that is attacking the immune system and killing people? Or do you believe that it's no more than is ordinary, or that has always been happening?
For one thing, I've never been able to quite figure out what an immunologist is talking about when he describes the condition of having antibodies to some foreign virus as being an immunodeficiency. I mean, do they mean that you can't make antibodies anymore? Do they mean that your immune cells are dying off? If your CD4 cells are in fact useful to you, maybe they're right. Nobody has really shown that CD4 cells are necessary. So I don't even know if immune deficiency is the way I would talk about the changes in the ratios of CD4 markers on immune cells or CD8 markers. That's what they usually measure. Nobody had ever measured that before the 1980s, and nobody's ever shown that that alone really has any kind of clinical significance. It may be that they just go up and down like the tides, and it's really not something to get all upset about. As soon as somebody puts a limit on it and says, if you got less than 200 CD4 cells, you're sick, and then they start giving you drugs that kill your CD4 cells, that could have the effect of making it look like it was a bad thing in the first place. But as far as what are all those little funny diseases, like cryptococcus and pneumocystis carinea and Kaposi sarcoma and those kind of things that we've lumped under this term AIDS, and also uterine cancer that's been stuck under there. Except for uterine cancer, which I think was kind of like a very transparent, like the motive there was transparent. We need some more women with AIDS, right? So that was a good way to get some women. But except for that one, I say all those other things, really, the way they came about in the 80s and the late 70s were as a result of a fairly experimental lifestyle, okay? What particular aspects of that lifestyle caused them, I don't know. It's hard to figure it out. For any one of them, if you were to really pursue it and say, I'm going to figure it out, why that one? Why pneumocystis carinea ever happened? If you could disentangle it from all the rest of them and get some research funding to try to find out why certain people die these days of pneumocystis carinea, you probably could. It's probably just another goddamn disease. It was a result, probably, of a type of a life that had not been lived too much in the 40s and the 50s and the 60s, and probably not much ever before. Whether it was the drug use, the lack of sleep, the poor nutrition, the tremendous number of contacts with other humans, and sexual contacts is simply the least of those, by the way. The gregarious, contacts of any kind with human beings